Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Marvel-ous Movie Mondays with Kelsey and Dill. The sun is shining through on you, Kels. You're glowing, Kels. How are you
I
doing?
feel like I look like I'm in heaven. Like, I feel like I look like I'm a ghost, but
Yeah,
that's okay because I have really bad allergies right now, so my face is, like, really unhappy.
yeah.
So
I was
it's
gonna
if
make a really
I'm
bad joke.
washed out, that's better than you seeing me just, like, be beet red.
Yeah, I was gonna make a really bad OJ joke. Like, guess who's not in heaven? But I'm not gonna do that. I kind of
Wait,
just did it there.
did OJ Simpson die?
Yeah, did you not know that?
Well, somebody made a comment I saw, like, a joke on TikTok, like, about his ghost, and I was
Mhm.
like, "Huh, that's weird.
Yeah. No,
I'm glad I didn't."
the best joke I said was something about like OJ can rest easy knowing his wife's killer is dead or something like that.
Oh my
I don't know.
god.
And this is not an OJ true crime podcast, but I was looking at what my best thing I watched this week was, and it is kind of like in that vein of like true crime kind of documentary. So like that was just on my mind. So I'm sorry if any
Yeah.
OJ fans, actually, if any OJ fans are watching, why? No, but this is Marvel's Movie Mondays. This is a Marvel podcast. Really quickly though, Kels, before we get into X-Men, what is the best thing you watched this week?
Wait, did you watched a true crime
Not
doc?
really true crime. Well, yeah, it's true crimes, but it's not like there's not killings. It's more of like a different kind of crime.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's multiple crimes, like,
Yeah,
killing isn't the only crime.
it's like it's a crime that like makes you it's like okay, I'll just say it. The Quiet on Set documentary on
Oh,
Netflix.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. You know, it's so sad, so unfortunate, and
Yeah.
I was worried watching it that they wouldn't address the stuff that because Drake Bell's been in the limelight for the past few years about some not so nice things, and then I like how they
Yeah.
kind of tied it back around and like did talk about some of those things and how it might be a product of his childhood and how
Yeah.
he does have some remorse and stuff. Like I think they handled everything very well. The only thing is that like I think this is gonna just prompt more people to step forward and talk more. So we're gonna get more later. I think this was kind of just scratching the surface, but again, I also think there's also a pressure out there for people to be like, well, they should come forward. Like, where was this person's statement and this person's statement? And sometimes
Mm.
it's just like you need to just give them time because it is a lot. But if you haven't watched that docu series, it's very, very good. What is the best thing you watched this week, Kelsey?
Well, I am in the midst of moving, so
Right.
I haven't gotten a chance to sit down and watch something, but I thought it was funny that you brought up watching a true crime documentary because I just went on, like, a true crime kick, like, the last, like, 2 weeks, and I watched
Yeah.
a miniseries on Netflix called American Nightmare,
Mhm.
and they basically call the case The Real Life Gone Girl
Right.
because it's back, in the year 2015 when that movie had just come out in 2014, I think, was Gone
Yeah,
Girl?
2014. Yep.
Yeah, so they there's just so many parallels to, like, what goes on in that movie to, like, what goes on in this case, and you don't know who to root for and who to be suspicious of,
Right.
but it is, I if you don't like, just hearing a tragically sad story about someone who's passed away, you can feel, good knowing about going into this one that the woman who was the victim of this crime, actually does make it out. She lives,
Cool.
so if you want one that's actually a little uplifting and
Mhm.
doesn't end on such a horrid note, you
Right.
should watch American Nightmare because
Cool.
it's different that they actually are able to hear from the victim and that they actually do, like, make it out of their situation.
Yeah. We're recording this at 9:30 on Monday morning, and I woke up at 9:20 on Monday morning. So if I'm making weird faces, it's because my contact lenses are still getting adjusted. So I'm not like
Okay.
looking at Kelsey being like, "What?" No, it's because of my eyes.
Yeah.
Cool. I didn't really have much Marvel news. They released images, I think, of the Deadpool popcorn buckets, but it could just be a joke because of Dune. Um, and I don't have those images, so I guess I can show you guys next week. Do you have any news, Kels, or no?
No, not that I can think of.
Cool. All right, then let's dive in. We originally planned on doing the full season, the full X-Men season today, but the thing is, it's such a long season, and because the Phoenix Saga and the Dark Phoenix Saga are such big parts of it, we figured let's do the first half as its own episode, which is like the Phoenix Saga and a few other episodes, and then we'll do the Dark Phoenix Saga and a few other episodes as next week's episode, just to kind of break it up a bit, just so we can also give more time to these episodes and not just like feel like we have to rush through it too much because we are in a little bit of a time crunch. So Yeah, I thought it was a solid. I mean, it really is the Phoenix Saga is like kind of the thing here. It's like that's like the talking point. That's the main
Right.
storyline. But I like how it's such a main storyline. It makes it feel like the season has a through line to where then when a few other episodes happen, they're a little more out of the blue, a little weirder, a little more random. But I do
Yeah.
want to acknowledge something, and I don't know if you saw this in your research, Kels, but some of these episodes look very different. And it's because
Do tell, Dale.
a few of the episodes for some reason, and I don't really know the actual details as to why, needed a little extra time to animate and didn't come out for 2 years until 2 years after. So there are two episodes that we are going to be covering today that were kind of written and conceived in this order, but then because of, I guess, budget restrictions or just, it just says here, due to animation problems they were held back 2 years. And that is episode 8, which is no mutant is an island, which is very
Mm.
interesting considering it explains a very big key plot point. And the other one is Long Shot. The last episode we'll be talking about today was released. The season was released in '94, I believe. And then that one episode, the one with Scott Summers or Cyclops, was in '96. It came out. It came out 2 years later. And then the one with Mojo came out 2 years later as well in October of '96. And then the rest of the season, I believe, came out subsequently in '94. But I just think that's so interesting. It's like we look now at the chronologicalness of the show, and a lot of it makes sense to happen in the order it happens in. So when this was airing, it was probably jarring, especially the Scott one, which we'll talk about. But it's like it's so much in response to the Phoenix Saga that it's a little
Right.
weird that came out 2 years later. So they probably saw it 2 years later and was like, "What is this about?" And like, wait, what? And it probably was like one of those things where they were like previously on, and then they showed the previously on, and people were like, "Oh, this is about Phoenix Saga." I don't know. But the good news is Disney Plus put it in the right order for us. So if you at home are like, "Oh shoot, what's the right order of these episodes?" Disney Plus did it right. So it didn't for a while. Originally, the X-Men episodes were put on the site wrong, but Disney actually put them in order in preparation for X-Men '97 to make our lives easier, Kel. So I'm very glad. Um, any thoughts on that?
That's really, really weird.
Did you notice the animation difference?
No, not really. Honestly, I was trying well, first of all, I was trying really hard to stay up to watch these episodes because I
Mhm.
watched all of them last night.
Yeah,
And so I think a lot of my opinions about this first half of the season are a lot to do with I was very tired. Just because I mm, I don't know. I wasn't like that into these episodes.
okay.
But I didn't notice a different in animation. I bet if I usually watch everything twice, so I had
Yeah, you
had
would have
time
picked
to
that
watch
up.
them a second time full, I might have noticed them. Um, but
Yeah,
according to IMDb, they came out pretty yeah, it's saying
two years after.
July, August. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird.
Wait.
But we do have the right order though. That's the main important
Yeah.
part. So if you were at home or like, what is the order of these episodes? This is the chronological order is what Disney Plus has now, and that's the intended order. But people air when they watched it at home growing up, this was totally out of order, which is so weird to me.
Yeah.
So Jean Grey just came back in Dark Phoenix without no sort of indication that she was even alive if you hadn't seen that episode, which is crazy. So yeah, very,
Crazy.
very wild. But let's start at the beginning before we get into the Jean Grey stuff. Let's kick it off, Kels.
Yeah, so season 3 episode 1, again, like all of our seasons have been starting, they episodes 1 and 2 are two-parters. Episodes 1 and 2 are both called Out of the Past. It was aired on July 29th, 1994. A little bit earlier than our first two seasons. Both started in October and kind of went
Yeah,
throughout the fall and winter, whereas this one came out earlier in the summer time. Yeah, so these two episodes basically revolve around a Wolverine storyline. I was kind of getting there's a lot of parallels between what happens, not a lot of parallels, really just the fact that um I was tying these episodes back into the Wolverine, the movie
yeah,
that came out
yeah.
in 2013.
Well, yeah, because it deals with the Japanese mythology of it all too,
Right.
and that's what mostly happens. Because I looked and like Lady Deathstrike is actually in X2. Because I was trying to remember, I was like, I've heard that name before. She's actually one of the henchmen of Stryker in
Yeah.
X2.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the stuff in the Wolverine is borrowed from like this type of comic line, if I had to guess.
Yeah. So, and I was trying to see. So I looked up the cast of the Wolverine because I was like, is Yuriko, I believe that's how you say her name. Yuriko
Yeah.
is Lady Deathstrike's name. And I was like, is that the name of the girl in the Wolverine? But her name is actually Yukio. So it's different.
Yeah, it's
Um,
I imagine there's some parallels, and I do think I imagine there's parallels. I think they wanted Lady Deathstrike for X2, but I think they wanted kind of this like more romantic stuff to happen, and I don't know. It's very interesting.
yeah. And so we are kind of dealing with this spirit drinker, to which I said, oh, a Dementor.
Yeah,
Um, this like alien being that's like not really like tangible. It's kind of just like this glowy like spirit basically. That's, taking the spirits of people around them, and they kind of, the Morlocks were planning on sorry, let me get my thoughts in order here. So we start in the sewers with the Morlocks. I love seeing the Morlocks again. I
mhm,
like them because they're not really like antagonists per se. They're kind of just like this off, like these different group of mutants that are just also trying to live, but because like their mutations are physical, they live down in the sewers.
yeah,
Um, and I just love that they kind of like do their own thing. Is it morally gray? Yes. But, it's because they are not viewed as like, none of the mutants are viewed as superheroes in this world just
mhm,
yet, but like them especially because of their physical mutations. And so we start with Leech. I liked Leech a lot. I thought that
mhm.
he was kind of cute.
Yeah,
And
like
so
cute.
he's just trying to they steal this weapon from Lady Deathstrike so that they can open up this alien spacecraft that's been banished by the Empire. Um, because it was like a warning. They were trying to get rid of this spirit drinker.
Mhm.
Um, and so then Wolverine actually ends up accidentally opening the alien spacecraft, unleashes the spirit drinker. Jubilee is still annoying, in case you were wondering.
At least she's
Um,
on our screens this season, which is
and
good
then
because
this
I felt like she wasn't
entire,
there last time.
who's doing a lot of screaming in these first two episodes? Professor X. He was just yelling. He had nothing to contribute. He's just
Which
yelling.
which is setting up the Phoenix thing because he's got to like tease that something big is happening because
Right.
that was their whole thing is like this episode and this whole season was like built around the Phoenix Saga, so it's like one of those things where they really had to hype it up in a way, and I think this
Right.
is the way to do it. Yeah.
And and then I noticed at the end of episode 2, Dill, I was like, Storm wasn't in this at all. And come to think
No.
of it, neither was Rogue. And I
No.
write down for multiple episodes, where is Rogue?
Yeah, and they keep mentioning they're like she's off on a mission or something. Like they keep acknowledging it, but I was curious as to that too. Is there a
Yeah.
reason why? And we might find out. I guess maybe we haven't
Yeah.
really found out really.
So, oh yeah, one of the quotes that I wrote down for episode 1 was, "Man, we gotta talk to Storm about who we give our number to," because that's when Leech called them. It was like, "I need your help."
Yeah,
And Wolverine was like, "Oh, I know exactly what this is. I'm gonna go." And Gambit was like, "Gambit smells a trap," or whatever the hell.
yeah. I like Gambit more this season than I did last season. I think Gambit's winning me back.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Me too. Okay, so then yeah, I just thought that these first two episodes were just like kind of random. I also
Yeah,
don't really love a storyline or one of the episodes is completely revolves around Wolverine because I feel like there's so much lore to his character that they kind of just like keep giving us like tidbits of information on his past, but it's all out of order. It's all like so randomized that it's
hmm
like kind of hard to keep up with like like because they
yeah.
had to show us flashbacks of like him getting the animatium animentium
Animation, you're
skull
close.
or skeleton, and I was like, okay, yes, this I know, but it's just like they keep just like, and then we had the offshoot last season with the Canada episode where we were
Right.
introduced to Alpha Flight, which I did enjoy, but it's just like sometimes I just feel like I don't know.
Well, and I think
I
that's
also
why he
just
gets a trilogy in the live action because I think, like,
yeah,
he's just such a great character, and he's got so much there, and
yeah.
it's one of the more intriguing characters, and I think that's honestly why they start off the season here like that because I think they know they're like, "Wolverine's our standout, he's our guy, so we're gonna, like, make him the focus here and get people back into the show this way." Instead of starting with with the Phoenix Saga where they're like, "Oh, we're kicking it off with Jean Grey," and people are like, "Who's that?" Whereas,
Sure.
like, here, it's like, yeah, they're kicking it off with a bang because it's Wolverine, and like the other ones who were in this one are it's like Gambit, and Jubilee, who we don't love Jubilee, but Jubilee was like the kind of audience surrogate to the first season. So I like how that they're kind of capitalizing on that. One thing I also really like about this season in particular is that I feel like now they're like, okay, we got 2 seasons on our belt. We're still going to be running for a pretty long while. We have these two big storylines to do, but like let's introduce like all the characters we have. Like let's really show off how many different mutants there are because I feel like we get so many mutants in this season. It's almost a
Mm,
little hard to keep up with, but there's so many mutants, and I know there's even more to come because we haven't even seen Iceman or Nightcrawler yet, and I know they're coming
mhm,
up. So like it's really cool to see just like how many mutants they're trying to give us while also making them seem like they actually have a purpose in these storylines, which is good. Like, oh, here's how we're gonna get Lady Deathstrike in here. We're gonna make it a Wolverine thing. I don't know. I like this. I think in terms of a season premiere, it's always hard because it's like this is not the main story of the season, so it's hard. It feels very, like you said, like kind of one off. And if they had done all these Wolverine episodes subsequently, it might have felt like that was its arc. Whereas I
mhm,
feel like they just kind of have these kind of standalone episodes around their main storylines because we're about to get into Phoenix Saga. Like that's the main storyline, and even that some
mhm.
of the episodes that follow kind of tie into that. Whereas I feel like this one does feel like an outlier. But for a season premiere, I mean, Wolverine, it's kind of the way to go.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess I just think that I'm comparing so much to like the movies that like I
Hmm.
obviously love like Hugh Jackman as the Wolverine so much that like I just don't think that this animated series is giving like doing Logan justice.
Right.
So I just get kind of annoyed when an entire
Yeah.
episode is about
Well,
him.
and that series very quickly realized he's the main character. And I don't know if it was from the very, very first movie where they were like, "That's our main character," but I think it was like here, like technically, I mean, it's supposed to be Professor X, but really, like I feel like Cyclops is the one that they try to make like the Captain America of this series, like the
Mhm,
leading man. So it's very interesting to just see how the comics portray it versus the movies because I think the movies. The reason why Hugh Jackman's such a standout is because it's Hugh Jackman, and they really capitalized on that. So it's really just a matter of like maybe he is more of a supporting character, and we are lucky to get these moments with him. But we, as the audience who's seen the live action, are a little spoiled in thinking that like Wolverine should be the main character. Maybe I'm wrong though. Maybe he is, and maybe we'll see more of him going forward more consistently. But
yeah.
still love him. Still love him.
I just felt like because they're doing like the Phoenix Saga, and then obviously in like a few episodes from now, maybe I think only like one or two, we have the Dark Phoenix
Mhm.
saga coming. I just feel like they should have started with the Phoenix Saga, like done some filler episodes in between. So then at the end of the season, they can end on the
Right.
Dark Phoenix.
And because of these episodes that we have talked about that were released 2 years later, there's only one episode between Phoenix and Dark Phoenix, which
Right.
is the what's it called, the Archangel episode with Apocalypse. So that's really
Oh
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's the only episode that aired between them. So it's even weirder, I think. Yeah, because it just kind of jumps in. I honestly think they were just really excited to get to that storyline, and they're like, we need to do it. We need to do it. Um, and now we'll talk about it because that's what's next.
Yes. So episode 3 is the first part of our saga, the Phoenix Saga's sacrifice.
Hmm.
Basically, Professor X gets these like visions, these dreams, nightmares, whatever you want to call them. And he tells the X-Men, I'm like, you have to get on this space shuttle when it launches into the and goes to the Eagle One's station in space because something bad's going to happen and you need to be there for it. And so basically, we are introduced to one of our many villains during the course of this saga, Eric the
Hmm.
Red,
Yeah.
who's again part of this empire. I can't remember the name of the empire and I don't want
Uh,
to butcher it.
Shi'ar?
Shi'ar,
Yeah,
yes,
Shi'ar,
that.
yeah.
And so that's kind of where like Lady Deathstrike came in. So it's seeming like this empire is going to be like the main overarching villain for our entire season because that's the
Yeah,
emperor that we
yeah.
get to
Well,
know later on
because
is like
Magneto is MIA this season as
right.
far as we know so far, so
Yeah, so we're kind of like we're in our, like, I almost want to say like our Infinity War, like Endgame era, where it's like all the Avengers are like scattered like into space, and it's no longer just like, fighting for Earth. It's like fighting for the whole
Mhm.
galaxy. And it's just like, whoa, like the stakes got so much higher this season so quickly. And so uh upon like needing to land this spacecraft, basically Jean Grey has to take over. It's very similar to like what happens in the actual Dark Phoenix movie with Sophie Turner.
Yeah.
Um, she gets too exposed by radiation and it unleashes this phoenix, but of course it's not a dark phoenix yet. It's just her phoenix uh, power, which obviously uh, Scott's not handling too well because.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I love about this particular depiction of it is I love the
Hmm.
visuals. I think with
Hmm.
the animation they really can do a really cool thing. Like you kind of see that big phoenix around her. Like I don't
Hmm.
know, it just feels very cool compared to like obviously the live action, which is harder to convey. You know.
Yeah. So then in episode 4, the Phoenix Saga 2, part 2,
Mhm.
The Dark Shroud, we kind of get introduced to this, like, I called him the Doctor Strange Professor X, where like
Yeah.
Doctor Strange kind of like unlocks his like astral form. He has like a cape, he's doing like
Mhm.
evil shit, but he like doesn't really exist. He's just kind of like everyone's kind of like imaginary friend
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of thing. I was really having a hard time following this one, but I just wrote down this quote in the beginning of the episode because once again, Hank is just really doing it for me at every
Yeah.
corner of all these episodes. I'm like, if Hank's involved, everything's gonna be okay. But at the beginning of this episode, they the space shuttle that they were in has just like fallen into like the Hudson River, and now it's like taking on water, to which I wrote down, "Is this the billionaire TikTok to see the Titanic?" I said TikTok and I meant Tic Tac for
I
real.
I I got
Um, anyway, and so it starts taking on water, and Hank just goes, "The capsule seems to have lost its watertight integrity." I'm like, what gave it away, Hank? The fact that there's water bursting through the seams of this thing? Like, yeah, I was like, yeah, duh, Hank. Thank you for
yeah.
that. And so we kind of have this like anti Professor X. And oh, I wrote down, oh, this is now the 4th episode into the series where I wrote down, "Where is Rogue?"
Yeah. She's on
I
a
like,
mission.
but I want her back.
I know. Rogue's been a fan favorite here.
Oh, he's going to see Myra. Oh, yeah. And then we get introduced to this other character in the Empire, Lalandra.
Mhm.
She's the sister to Gabriel, who's the Emperor. And
Mhm.
basically, the real problem of this whole saga gets introduced to us in this episode, which is this guy is going after this crystal. Like, oh, maybe like something else we know in the universe,
Yeah.
like an infinity stone. And basically, if he gets this crystal, he can destroy the entire
World.
galaxy
Yeah.
universe. So they need to stop this guy from getting the crystal, the the Macron crystal, something
Yeah.
like that. Oh, and then Juggernaut randomly showed up in this episode, to which
Yep.
this is when I wrote down, "This is getting messy." I'm like,
Yeah.
"There's too much happening. There's too much to keep up with."
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I said earlier. Like I love it that we're just seeing so many different X-Men and so many different things because like we now know our core cast so well. We also get Banshee this episode, which I'm sure you'll talk about.
Yes.
But like,
Yep.
yeah, and I love Banshee, but I do think yeah, it's a lot, and I did have to watch this twice because it was a lot. Like
Mhm.
it was just yeah, there's a lot happening, and because it is 5 episodes of with one storyline, imagine if it was only 2 or 3. Like, it really needs the 5 episodes to breathe, which is why it can lend itself to a full film because there's so much. But I kinda like it. I think it's a good way of, like, you know, feeding new characters in because the main storyline, the other characters are so well established, and Jean is really the focus of that. And the rest of them don't really get a ton to do because they're trying to
Yeah.
focus it on the rest. So, and they get
Yeah.
Professor X more this episode, which I think is good because, as you talked about last season, he really didn't do much. So
Yeah, they're definitely giving him more to do, but it's just like between what everything that he's got going on, getting introduced to all these new people in space,
Mm.
now like involving Juggernaut. In the next episode, we get introduced to another guy, Gladiator. I was really struggling like keeping track of everything because I think that even what's going on with Jean Grey, I felt like wasn't super explained well because she would just show up. They would be like, "Oh, we don't know how to stop all these people and we don't know what to do." And then all of a sudden she would just come in and be like, "Phoenix power." And
Yeah,
then
it's the Captain Marvel problem in Endgame where it's like, where's Captain
mm,
Marvel? Well, you have to kind of only use her in bits because she's so powerful that if you have
right.
her the whole time, it's going to make it a lot easier for the Avengers. And it's one of those things where she comes in at the very right time and then she does get stopped, but like it's they wait to bring her in because she's all powerful, kind of like Jean here.
Oh, and then we get into episode 5 and the Phoenix Saga 3, Cry of the Banshee.
Mm,
Upon reading that title, I was like, "Oh, it's Banshee."
we know him.
We know him. We loved him from First Class.
Mhm,
But then this episode started off with them basically having to defeat Juggernaut the same way we've already defeated him in like a past episode in either season 1 or season 2 where they were like, "Oh, we have to get his helmet off and then we can fucking
right.
get him that way," and like whatever. Um oh, and then the gladiator shows up in this one and basically Jean Grey is like, "Oh, the emperor, he's here." And so then episode 6, Phoenix Saga 4, Starjammers, more villains, more villains. Now we've got these pirates coming in to also try to steal the crystal. And one of them is what I wrote, what could only be described as a sea monster with a puffle on his shoulder. And
Mm,
do you need to know what a puffle is? I'll explain it to you. Those are the pets that you could have in Club Penguin. They're like literal
mm,
little fluff balls, and they came in different colors, and you can name them things and you can feed them and give them toys. Those were Puffles in Club Penguin, in case anyone needed to be reminded. But he has
mm,
this like random thing on his shoulder that I was like, I'm sorry, did I see that correctly?
yeah.
um and so, and then this is so crazy. I feel like I'm regurgitating this. I'm like having a fever dream. I'm like, did I make this up?
Mhm,
Or is this actually what happened in the episodes? And then one of the pirates, like the main pirate in the pirate
yeah.
gang, just
Corsair.
so happens to be Scott's father,
Yes.
which is our big reveal in that episode.
Yes.
And he
Yes.
wants to use Scott to lure the emperor to them now that they have the crystal because they're like, "Oh, I'm going to sell this crystal to the emperor, but really what you're going to do is you're going to fucking murk this guy for me."
Mhm.
And Scott's like, "No, I don't kill without cause." I'm like, "Scott, this guy wants to destroy the universe. I think that's a pretty good cause. I think that's a pretty good reason to
Yeah.
fucking take this guy out when you
Yeah.
have the
I
chance."
mean, to be fair, Cyclops is going through it. I mean, there's so much shit he's got going on this season. I mean, like
Yeah.
Jean is doing her thing. Like he doesn't know where she is at this point because she keeps coming and going.
Yeah.
Um, it's
Yeah.
I don't envy him. I feel for him.
I just wish there was a moment between like Professor X and Jean, so they could have had a moment that was like, "Oh, what's happening to me? Like, I don't understand." And then Professor
Yeah.
X could have just like explained it to us in like a simple way because I just feel like I don't really know what the Phoenix power does other than like the fire obviously, and like the Phoenix gets like illustrated around her. I'm like, so that makes her what? Invincible. It gives her like
Hmm.
extra telekinetic powers. Like it's just it was just all getting lost in translation for me. And I think that if
Yeah.
they just eliminated like one extra villain, preferably Juggernaut, because I just felt that he was probably the most random, being that all the other villains in the story, or at least A from space or B connected to the Empire. Um, they should have just like gone
Yeah.
into detail about like what's going on with Jean
That's
Grey
fair.
just a
Yeah.
little bit more. I
Hmm.
think that's just also the problem that I've had with Jean Grey's character from the beginning of this series is that they just don't really know what to do with her. And
Hmm.
when it's even about her, I feel like they're not even giving it the time that it needs.
Right. And I do hope, just from what I've heard, I know the Dark Phoenix storyline is, like, really freaking good here, so, like,
Okay.
I'm hoping it resolves really nicely,
Yeah.
because I think there are moments, especially in these last 2 episodes, that are really nice, where she is kind of like that kind of moment between her and Scott that she has either in episode 4 or 5, where it kinda happens twice, where she kinda has to tell him, she's like, "I have to go," and he's like, "Don't
Yeah.
go." She's like, "Yeah," and, and then the final time she actually goes, like, and dies.
Mhm.
So it's like one of those things where I think that is probably the more interesting element of this whole thing, and that's why the Dark Phoenix is going to be tough because we know what's coming. We know it's going to be, we have to kill her or she's going to kill us type deal. So it's one of
Mm.
those things where I'm very interested to see where it goes because I agree. I think Jean has been underserved for the most part. Even Scott has been kind of underserved for being like the second in command of Professor X. He really isn't, or I guess he's third because Storm is second. I don't know.
Mhm.
And again, like, yeah, it feels like with all these new characters, the only con is that, like, where's Rogue? Storm's barely a factor. Now Wolverine's not a huge factor either. Like, Magneto's not back. Like, there's so many characters now that we're not seeing because of this. But I do think just the fact that Jean's getting a spotlight is already an improvement over the past 2 seasons for her. So I'm like, you know what? The others could take a back seat because I'm sure we'll get more of them when it comes to Dark Phoenix because that's more about their story. Because this is more about the crystal. Dark Phoenix, I think, is more about like the X-Men as a whole trying to like
Mhm.
battle her.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that'll also probably be, like, more entertaining when it's a more condensed and
yeah,
controlled conflict just
right,
between amongst them and not this, like, out literally otherworldly,
yeah,
um, thing that they have going on. So now, we're on episode 7, the 5th and final part of the Phoenix Saga, Child of Light. I'm sorry, there's one character, his name is CHO at what's that called? Apostrophe D, and you pronounce it chode, and I'm so sorry, but, like, come on. I can't, I don't, I'm not mature enough to not bring that up.
Mhm.
I need to mention that someone's name is Chode. And, um, basically, like, this is when the Emperor, like, really gets the crystal. He basically becomes, an unbeatable, unstoppable, and, Phoenix saves the day. Again, no explanation. Then she goes to sacrifice herself. That's what I have written down. Oh, there
Yeah,
was this really funny part where she's like, "Well, now I have to house the crystal," and then the crystal becomes like a part of like the Phoenix's, like it's almost like the Phoenix is
yeah,
wearing a necklace, and she's like, "With the strength of like your innocence and your power and your
yeah. I like
confidence,"
that.
and then the floating heads are coming up of all the different X
Yeah,
Men. I was like, I like this, but the floating heads are a little goofy, but it's okay.
they are. But I
I
also like
respect
how
them
she
being goofy.
acknowledges what each person means to her, and I forget
Yeah.
what she said for Scott. It was something like I forget, but I really liked it because it was something less about his power and more about his like heart, but not
Mhm.
his heart, but his love, or I don't know.
Yeah. I should have wrote down what she said. The only one that I remember is that for Logan, she said, "Your innocence," and I was like, I don't think Logan's that innocent, actually. I think that he has a lot of skeletons in his closet, but maybe that's just me.
Some literal skeletons of adamantium.
Exactly. And so poof, there she
Yeah.
goes. The
Which
Emperor
sorry,
gets
go ahead.
yeeted into,
Yeah.
like, nowhere, and so he's gone, but, like, not forever,
Mhm.
and Jean's gone, but not forever,
Right.
and
Well, which we thought like which we know she's not, but like I feel like
yeah.
at the time, if you didn't know and you were like a
Mm.
big Gene fan, which I don't know if you are,
How could you
but
be? But anyway.
no, but like I think that last moment probably would have hit a little bit stronger, because they're all crying and standing there. It honestly reminded me of Guardians 2, where they're all standing looking out at the sky crying.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of that imagery that you see, but no, I like how we're getting into space stuff. I think that's fun. I like the other characters just seeing more of the world. And I like that Jean Grey got something to do. So I'm a fan of the Phoenix Saga, but I'm sure the Dark Phoenix Saga is going to be even better.
Yeah.
Um, but this next episode is kind of part of it, though. Like it's almost like an epilogue to this series of episodes. So we'll talk about it.
Yeah, Dill, I really liked this episode
Me too.
a lot. I think that this was probably my favorite out of
Me
these
too.
10. Um, and so we kind of just get a look back on like Scott's life, like how last season, a lot of them were getting individual episodes and plot lines. This is, I would call, Scott's episode. So it's called
Yeah.
No Mutant is an Island. And basically, he revisits the orphanage where he grew up, where he finds out that this man named Mr. Kilgrave, who, come on now, that's a villain's name. You're going to trust a person with that name? So
Zebediah Kilgrave.
Zebediah?
Yeah.
Ooh, Zebediah. I'm going to put
Who
that
actually
on my...
first appeared in Daredevil. He was a Daredevil villain in the comics.
Oh, fun fact.
Yeah.
And so
And
he's...
sorry,
Go
he's
ahead.
the main villain of the Jessica Jones series, which we haven't watched yet, which we probably will at some point.
Yeah, we probably
So
should.
he's a main live action villain, actually played by David Tennant. So it's
Oh,
cool.
nice.
Yeah, Harry Potter there.
So he is adopting all these different mutant kids because he's basically raising an army. Scott finds out about this through one of the kids, Rusty, who has powers really similar to Pyro. So at first I was like, Pyro? No. We're introduced to Pyro. And so, Scott has to just like save these kids and convince the woman working the orphanage, like Sarah. She's like, how could I think that like these kids were getting like adopted and they were going to be safe? Like, I have to, protect these kids. And, through, Scott kind of starts this episode, not really wanting to be a part of the X-Men anymore. And he was like, I'm kind of done with this. Like, I was, you didn't trust me enough to like lead this team, and now Jean's gone. He obviously has some beef now with Professor X, but he kind of ends this episode being like, you know what, as much as like, obviously I'm glad I helped these kids here, but I'm needed, with my real family, and I know that I'm need to go back there. So it's like this nice little, character development for Scott, who is otherwise like a pretty one note dude.
Right.
He hasn't gotten the depth that the other characters have gotten. So I really liked, liked this episode.
Yeah, no, I did too. I mean, you said it best. I also think it's one of those things where I'm like, how is this the one that you didn't get done in time to air? Because I think it's so important for the Phoenix Saga. Because I mean, I've watched the whole season, so like I know what's coming. So I'm like, oh, it helps so much for Dark Phoenix to have this episode, for Scott to have that moment. And this is the episode where we find out that Jean is still alive, or she can still be alive. So it's like, how do they not put this in the thing? Because at the very end, Professor X is like, look, she's still out there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how did audiences respond? I wonder when she comes back in Dark Phoenix, they're probably like, wait, she's alive? What the fuck? Unless you've read the comics. But it's like, I just, or seen the movies, I guess, like us. But like, I don't know. I feel like this is such an important episode to have in there. It'd be like if they released Avengers Endgame, and then they went on to do Phase 4, and then we saw Spider-Man No Way Home, and then like now they release Spider-Man Far From Home, and it's like, oh yeah, Tony Stark's dead, and like he hasn't been out as Spider-Man. It just wouldn't make sense.
Yeah. Weird. I wanted to say that the improvement, just like costume and look wise, from Jean Grey to Phoenix was such an improvement for me. I thought that her uniform was so much better and like more appealing when she became the Phoenix. That was just like a random thought I had, because I remember at the end of the episode that we were just talking about, when Professor X is like, oh, she's still out there, she's back in like her Jean Grey look, which I was like, oh no, I didn't like that one. Okay, so Professor 9 is Obsession.
Professor 9, yep.
It's when we're kind of circling back to Archangel Warren Worthington, and he is basically like, I need to go after Apocalypse because he made me this way, and I hate it. And fuck Apocalypse. And so basically the X-Men have to intervene and be like, you can't do this by yourself. Like we all, the team, have tried to stop Apocalypse and we couldn't do it. So I don't know what you think you're getting yourself into. So I wrote down Gulliver's Travels, because there was just this moment where like Apocalypse was like getting chained to the ground, and then they were like walking on top of him or like flying over him or something, and it just reminded me of that movie.
This is one of those things where it's like, I think this is more like where do you air this episode? I guess you'll air it here type deal. Like it's one of those things that doesn't really have any tie to the main plot. But what I do like again is that they're giving these other characters spotlights. Like Archangel's getting an episode, which is cool. You know, like I just think it's cool to kind of spread the wealth. All because we talked about it. X-Men: The Last Stand did Angel so dirty.
Mhm.
That was one of the weakest story plots of that movie. So it's just cool to see him also just seeming more powerful in general. Just like got a cooler visual, design and all that. But again, it's like, it just kind of comes out of nowhere. It doesn't feel like it really belongs
Yeah.
in this overall story. If you're looking at this Phoenix thing, it's just
Yeah.
kind of random, especially because this is when it aired the one episode that was aired between them. Like there wasn't this Scott episode from last time, and then this Mojo episode coming up were not part of the original airing. So it's like
Mhm.
it would have felt even more random then. But I guess they needed that one like break where it's like, all right, let's do a little side quest, and then we'll come back. Got a lot of little Beast action, which is good. Like good to see Beast get some fun. But
Yeah. Is this the one where he was kind of like in love with the computer?
yes, yes, he
Okay.
bonds
I
with
was
the AI. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. And
it's such
so
the trap.
yeah. So he traps Apocalypse and then basically like he takes over the ship and then flies off into the sunset.
And I
Is
love
what I
how
wrote
Beast is
down.
just one more thing on Beast. I love how he's not a vampire, but he loves to just like hang by his feet and
Yeah.
just chill upside down. I just love that.
Yeah.
Such a cool design. I don't know,
He's
Beast. I love Beast. Beast can do no wrong. So
Yeah,
yeah.
we also got a few moments with Beast. I forgot to mention this, but one of the episodes starts with like him on like a date, it seemed like, but not a date because like the woman who he was with was like terrified to be there with him. But he's just talking about like they're at a museum and he's just talking about the paintings and just being like, "Oh, this is a Jackson Pollock," and blah 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 blah. And the look on this woman's face is they're like, I didn't know he was gonna." And we get a few moments like there's another one where he like tries to hail a cab, but then as soon as the cab driver sees him, he's like,
Mhm.
obviously like, oh, and then like drives
Yeah.
away. And so we've been kind of getting these moments throughout this season specifically where like people are really not taking well to Beast. And it's just
Yeah.
making me feel like maybe we're gonna get, as so far it really hasn't like affected him in a serious way. Like he hasn't been like getting really like sad about it. He's just kind of been brushing off all these little moments, but
Mhm.
I'm wondering if they're like building to
Right.
something else. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
No, yeah, I love Hank and I love Beast, and I think it's also the idea that he is the most physically changed.
Mhm.
Like Jean Grey on the surface. I mean, not as Phoenix, but looks just kind of normal. Like a lot of them look normal.
Mhm.
Not to say Beast looks abnormal, but you know what I mean. Like it's one of those things where it's like it just kind of hammers home the woke themes, of like judging people by their appearances and their races and all that shit. So it's a
Yeah.
really it's good that they keep sprinkling that stuff in because I feel like this season probably has the least amount of the like the commentary and like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, unless you look at the Phoenix as like kind of sort of a coming out of a way in a way, but I don't know. Let's talk about
Well,
Long
I do we have to?
Shot.
Um, well, Dill, I just wanted to say real quick, like I think that's because like so far this season has been, just dealing with evil mutants, and there hasn't really
Mhm.
been a human villain. Like our entire like one of our main
Right,
players, main antagonists last season were the Friends of Humanity, the
right. The
fucking
Nazis.
Nazi group.
Yeah.
And we're not really dealing with that this season. We're dealing with, literal outer space, like intergalactic mutants. So
Mhm.
it's kind of
Yeah.
I think that adding so I like how they're still including these moments of like this turmoil
Yeah.
between humans and mutants through the moments with Hank,
Right.
even though it does make me deeply sad for Hank.
Yeah.
Um, so episode 10, long shot, as oh, as soon as the like,
Previously on.
here's what you missed on Glee started playing, and it like reminded us of the Mojo episode from last season. Oh God, I was like, no, 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 this guy's not coming back. And so basically, Longshot was like the first mutant he was using as the actor in his TV show. And so now Longshot is just kind of like looking for his purpose in life now that he no longer like works for Mojo. So he ends up
Mm,
on Earth. There's also these weird vibes throughout the episode with Jubilee and Longshot, and I couldn't tell
Yeah.
if it was like mentor mentee or something worse.
I think it's Rachel Berry and Will Schuester, where it's like he's like, "No, no, no, no," and she's like, "But I love you." And he's like,
Mm,
"No." You know what I'm talking about? That storyline on
mhm,
Glee, the most uncomfortable
mhm.
one of the series.
Don't
Um,
stand so,
yeah,
don't stand so close to me.
what an awkward time to be a Glee fan. But yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
one of those. I think it's one of those. I really like Longshot though. I think like he's a fun personality. He's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the design. Like I like it. I like how these other kind of side characters are getting spotlights. I just think
Yeah.
it's making this world feel more lived in and more, you know, accepting. I don't know.
Yeah.
More, I don't
He
know
was
the word.
kinda giving, like, himbo to me. He was
Yeah.
very much like Thor,
Yes.
in my mind. There's this
Yes.
one quote, I forget who says it, but they're, like, analyzing Longshot, and they go, "Oh, the mind is barren," and I'm like, "That's a really funny way for, like, calling someone stupid." Like, I think the next
Yeah.
time I wanna say, like, "You idiot" to someone, I'm just gonna be like, "Wow, your mind is barren."
Yeah.
I'm like,
No,
"That
it's great.
what a drag."
It's great.
And
Yeah.
y yeah,
Mojo.
so we don't have to talk about him. I really don't wanna talk about him.
I didn't know
Um,
he was coming up, and I felt really bad, when I saw him come up. I was like, "Oh, Kelsey's gonna hate this. Kelsey's gonna hate this."
well, yeah, and then they don't even really defeat him at the end. He kinda just, like, teleports away at the end, so there wasn't even any, like, justice. So I was just like because I remember, like, someone was going after him, but I was like, "No, Longshot should be the one that, like, gives the final blow," but then even before he can do that, Mojo just kinda,
Mhm.
like, teleports away. So that
Well,
makes me fear that he might be back.
I have good news for you. Unless he shows up on X-Men '97, which hasn't finished airing, he is not in the rest of X-Men the Animated Series. He's in 2 episodes, and that's it. So, you're good.
Um, good. Good news.
Yes. I don't necessarily know if we need to do, like, an MVM, LVM since the season's not over, but so far,
Yeah.
who's in the running right now for your MVM and LVM?
Um, I mean, I just like sheer power wise, like I've been saying, I wish we would go more into it as to why
Mhm.
she's so powerful, but I think Jean Grey is definitely up there for me just because I think that, this is the most she's gotten to do in the 3 seasons so far. Um,
Yeah.
and honestly, and I just love Hank. It might be Hank at the end of all this. Who
Yeah.
knows? If he gets a
Yeah.
good juicy episode in the second half of this season, he might just take the cake for me.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm looking at Jean right now. I'm looking at Cyclops just because of
Mhm.
character. But I
Mhm.
also think Gambit's making a case because he's really like shaped up. I think this season he's still just as he's not in it a lot, but he's like kind of
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. I'm enjoying Gambit a lot more this season. Who's can kind of in the running for LVM for me? I just think Storm and Rogue just need to do more.
Yeah,
And
they're
it's
just
not their
getting
fault.
completely
They're just
forgotten.
getting completely forgotten, and it's sad. And Magneto's not even there.
Yeah.
Um, but at least Magneto's not really part of the core team. Professor X, I feel like his visions obviously knew something was up, but he didn't really get the clear picture of it. So it's like
Mhm.
I don't know. I feel like he's getting more and more worthless. But again, I can't hate on him too
Yeah.
much. But that's kind of where I'm at. Any LVM for you?
Honestly, she started off annoying for me, but I feel like Jubilee has been kinda pulling her weight in some of these episodes, like, she's definitely more involved in, like, the
Mm,
action, and she's definitely, like, trying to step up, and, like, I feel like she's back to that, like, "Oh, maybe if I just prove myself to them, they'll start including me more," kind of headspace, as opposed to, like, last season, she was just like, "Well, I hate them because they treat me like a kid."
right.
Um, but as far as, like, an LVM, probably yeah, you're probably right, Jill, probably, like, we're looking at Rogue or Storm, which pains me because they were
I
such
love them.
strong
Yeah,
contenders in season 1 and season 2, and
yeah,
I just hope that,
yeah.
they're
It's
on the
hard
up
to
and up.
it's hard to talk about it without talking about the rest of the season. So I'll just say, let's
Mhm.
see. We'll see.
Okay.
Um, cool. So next week we will be covering the last half of this season, but then the week after, I am in Detroit for maybe a little premiere of a little something maybe I did. I don't know. But we are going to be doing trivia. We are finally back to our tournament. We are going to see the match of Alec versus David versus Noah. And then for the main event, we will be seeing the first round of the semifinals, which is going to be Ryan Payne, Robert Kastner, and Joe Fairley, which is going to be, it could be a finals in and of itself, that match. So that's going to be very exciting. Kelsey is not able to join me for the first match, but she'll be able to join me for the second match, which is going to be really exciting. So you have that to look forward to in 2 weeks. And then the week after is our subathon. So we'll have to come up with something. I don't think we should do X-Men for the subathon just because I feel like that's a little, like that's our.
I texted you
I
about
know.
what I was, but you never
I,
responded.
did I not? Oh,
So did
whoops.
you hate it?
No,
Did you
I
hate
was
my
probably in the
pitch here?
midst. Did you text me during my show? Because I was not responding to many texts during that.
I
So
think
we'll figure it out.
it might have been during
Yeah,
your
but
show.
we're gonna have something cool planned. And we'll have to figure out what hour of the 24 Kelsey will be able to help with. And then we have other shows that you'll probably see Kelsey on as well. Like we're gonna try to get her on one of the draft days, and we'll figure it out. But and Kelsey will be in the chat, and everyone will be in the chat. It'll be a lot of fun, and it'll be a fun time. So stay tuned. There's a lot of fun stuff coming here on the channel, and we're very happy that you're on along the ride with us. So there's our info at the bottom. Check us out. Kelsey's got to run, so I'm gonna end this here. Thanks so much for watching.